Hi, and welcome back to the Unofficial Entrepreneur Show. I'm Tony White, your producer and host, and today we're going to be digging into a topic that I think is a challenge for most business owners, and that's around how do I consistently recruit and retain high-quality talent into my business. I think it's fair to say that if I was to put two identical businesses with the same products or services in the same market with the same resources, the business with the high-quality team will consistently outperform the other. So undoubtedly, having a great quality team is a foundational plank in having a great quality business. Yet from my experience, most businesses either don't have any system at all of attracting and recruiting high-quality talent, or the system that they do have is ineffective in sifting, qualifying, and identifying that talent. Those of you who have been in business for some time will know the pain and cost of mishires. It's incredibly costly, be it lost market opportunity, the cost of re-recruitment, the cost of training, not to mention the inevitable increasing HR litigation challenges around removing a mishire. Well, today we're going to be looking at how we reduce the odds of mishires and we increase the odds of recruiting top-tier talent. It's my great pleasure to have on the show today a very special guest, Dr. Brad Smart. He's the CEO and founder of Topgrading. He's based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Topgrading has been widely acclaimed as the premier interviewing and selection system. Brad has consulted to Fortune 500 companies. I'm sure he's going to tell us a few stories today. But you know, the thing that really I like about Topgrading is it's also really most suitable for small to medium-sized businesses as well. In fact, the thing I love, the key word for me is the system, the Topgrading system, the Topgrading process. Brad is an accomplished author, having 7 best-selling books under his belt, with his seminal book, Topgrading, published in 1999. Showing your age there a little bit, Brad, but has had a couple of revisions since and is a great book. Those of you who also will know of Vern Harnish's acclaimed book, Scaling Up, the chapter on attracting and hiring talent is all based around Brad's Topgrading process. Brad has just released a new book last year called Foolproof Hiring, published by Forbes Books, and is focused and specifically tailored to entrepreneurs, focusing on the key essential steps of hiring A-grade players. Without further ado, it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome Brad to the show. Welcome, Brad.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you for the nice introduction. Most of it was true.
Well, I'm sure we'll unpack a little bit of those truths as we go through. Brad, just to kickstart us, I guess the obvious question is 7 books on hiring. Why a 7th book?
Yes, well, my friends who are very sensitive, empathetic, say, can't you get it right? I mean, what the heck? Over the years, there have been, we constantly look for ways to make Topgrading easier, better, even cheaper. And the examples have broadened, starting, frankly, a lot of the initial case studies were big companies. And one of the myths about Topgrading is mostly for big companies, and it's not. It's mostly for small companies, startups, perfect for the reasons that you mentioned. And one or two mishires could actually kill a startup. Yeah. So, Harry, if there's another one, it's probably going to be on our experience with almost 20,000 managers, senior managers, in small and large companies. And we coach them over the years and what worked for them to maximize their strengths and sometimes minimize weaker points, and that might be an important one. And there's a lot of myths out there. You have to go to the best schools and get MBAs, and that's total nonsense. With that myth, by the way, it's probably better to be reared in a town with just, ordinary people, not rich people, and coming from a family where everyone had to work hard, and right. And it dawns on a lot of people who will be watching this podcast that I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth,
Yeah.
And if I work hard and develop relationships with people, I can pick up the skills along the way. Maybe I can be successful. Yes. So that's it. And that's why this foolproof hiring, right, is, or doesn't have my high school picture on there,
That's
is
right.
as much as entrepreneurs, kinds of things they can do, and we will cover today. You do them this week, and you can, and you'll start experiencing better hiring in a couple of weeks. Really made it that simple.
That's great. Brad, just I mentioned in the introduction the whole area of mishires, and it just seems to be such a common practice. And I just wanted to know from your experience, your wealth of experience, is there any common denominator that makes people hire the wrong people?
Well, again, maybe start with it this way, as you do in conferences or training sessions and so forth. How many people in the room have suffered from mishires? Hands go up. If we were to Google, which I did as recently 1 hour ago, Tony, what percent of hires have turned out to be bad hires? You'll see all sorts of different versions of about 50%. 50%. So for anyone watching this podcast, if you're frustrated by so many bad hires, it's not your fault, right? It's the fault of your hiring method, if there is a method. As you said, maybe there isn't a method. But when you get to the bigger companies, they have the methods, and the methods are guaranteed to produce mishires. Right? We know this. That was true many decades ago. Not sure I want to say how many decades ago, but it's true today. The hiring problems are everywhere. The top grading solutions exist, and we'll go through those today.
Yeah, that's great. Brad, it would be great to tell our audience a little bit of your own backstory, and in particular, what led to the top grading methodology.
Yeah, right. Well, I was a freshman in college, and Business 101 was kind of boring, but I knew I wanted to be in business. Psych 101 was interesting. A local management psychologist taught a class on psychology for business. I took it, and he was just interested in getting people like me interested. Sounds really good. I want to be in this. So I went through yellow pages, and the town happened to be Milwaukee, found several groups of management psychologists. One of them kind of took me under their wing, and they got me summer jobs in college. And they said, to join us, we hope you do, you need a master's and a PhD in psychology. Because if you have a PhD in psychology, they call you doctorate, and people think you have deep insights into people. Well, I went that path, and along the way, everywhere I worked, it struck me that high performers made everything work, from the C-suite down to the hourly workers. I was one of those hourly workers, and hiring the high performers, whatever the salary is, get the best of class at that salary, and companies are going to be better off. So I went off to get the PhD, and academia had no interest in high performers. It was useful from a science standpoint, but I can't wait to join this firm, and they're the real experts. So I joined them, and I asked the senior partner, you think after all these years I hadn't asked that question? How good are we? What do you mean, Brad? Well, what percent of the people we interview and test and recommend for hire and who are hired turn out to be high performers? I don't know. You don't know? No, he said, but you're the new kid on the block. Why don't you go to our clients and ask them? So introduce yourself, and I asked them, and it turned out to be about 33%.
Wow.
Now, a third of the people who were recommended turned out to be high performers. And I told my wife, my gosh, if I were a medical doctor and 2/3 of my patients left the hospital in body bags every day, I'd feel like a failure. So then I just dug into it. What are the problems? What are the problems? What are possible solutions? Problem, solution, problem, solutions. And frankly, I went off on my own because I found some solutions that included longer interviews and some of the steps we'll talk about today. And the other professionals in the company didn't like it, but clients in Milwaukee, within a couple of months, they wanted me to assess people, do the interviews and so forth. They aren't going to change, and they're pressuring me. Brad, we're paying you for 4 interviews and assessments and 4 reports every day. You're only doing 1 thorough interview in the morning and a report in the afternoon. I don't think we can afford to keep you unless you adopt our ways. There's no way. I'm going to adopt their ways. There were test instruments that frankly didn't work very well. There were short interviews, hour and a half. I know that doesn't sound like a short interview, but it is. If you really get into this, you'll see huge value in a longer chronological interview. That's where you learn everything. So I went off on my own and just developed business without having a salesperson or marketing or public relations, just word of mouth, because the methods that we'll talk about today worked. They really did work to avoid those mishires that are so costly and maximize not just okay performers. You know, if you Google what percent are okay or better, that's only 50%. Nope. Entrepreneurs watching this want high performers, and you can get them with these methods. So been on my own for all these years. I'm semi-retired, mostly retired, but helping other professionals in the business. I don't take money from anyone, so right? I'm not going to promote money-making stuff here. But I like to spread the word, partly because top grading companies make more money and enjoy more profit. Those are the results that they're interested in. On a personal level, you know, at Christmas time to get cards from individual managers who have embraced these methods, and their life is better. You know, if they had 12 people in the company and there were 3 A's and 6 B's and 3 C's, now they have maybe only 8 people in the company, but 7 of the 8 are A players. Thank you. All right. They're making more money. They have more free time. They're happier. So that's a huge plus as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's great. And Brad, you've consulted over the years with some pretty high-profile companies as well?
No. Yeah, that's my sense of humor. I have a bad sense of humor. Yeah. In 1986, published the first book, and it was called Selection Interviewing, a Management Psychologist Recommended Approach. And I said in the introduction, I don't know if it's going to work for anyone else, but it seems to work for me. And there's a guy with General Electric who found it in London. I didn't even know the book was over there. He said, Jack Welch has been the chairman CEO of GE since about 1980, 1981. And he is very frustrated. He wants A players everywhere. And we've tried everything, and it's just not there. Only about 25% of the people we hire at any level turn out to be those A players. But the guy said, I think Jack's going to like your methodology. And he did, and we did the rollout starting in a couple of years later. Everybody had been trained. In the 1980s, GE's market cap got up to $30 billion without top grading. With top grading, and it went up to $570 billion. Right, the wealthiest company in the world. And I thought, well, you keep saying how top grading contributed to all that. And he did. He was very public about it because he wanted all the vendors to GE, thousands of vendors, to top grade so that GE would be served by A players, not the mixture. And I thought the board of directors might think, well, let's give Brad just a little token amount, maybe 1%. Of course, Jack died several years ago, and he resigned in 2021. But I still go out to my mailbox hoping I get that letter with the check for whatever 1% of $500 billion is. Maybe it's not coming.
Yeah, well, I saw on your in your books and on your website personal testimonies from Jack Welch. So obviously he had a very high regard for it. And
yes, and there are a lot of Fortune 500 companies. Merck, Shell. Actually, the chairman's wife was a top grading professional for a while. Karen. British at Barclays was one with Bob Diamond, the chairman of E-Trade, said without top grading, E-Trade would have gone under. But we also have at topgrading.com case studies of startups, the smaller companies. We actually had a blog this past week where Ken Griffin, you wouldn't necessarily know who he is, but he's the chairman of Citadel. It was about 15 years ago when I was retiring. I passed the baton to my son, and he was just getting started. He was not making a lot of money, but boy, he got really enthusiastic about top grading. And he says it again and again. If you're a CEO, any size company, you better hire A players, because if your competitor is hiring A players and you're not, then you get killed. He's now worth $40 billion or something like that.
It's incredible. It must be great to look back over your career and just see the impact that you've made on businesses and managers in that process, and largely as a result of your process that started way back in 1986.
Yeah, there's a yes but in there, Tony, in that when I semi-retired, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I didn't really drive the methodology that I should have in retrospect. A lot of the, in fact, all those CEOs retired within the next 5 years, very rich, by the way. and the chief human resources people went elsewhere. So kind of starting over, but it's happening. But I enjoy doing this, and I hope that every one of the people watching the podcast will say, yes, I tried it, or some of it anyway, and I'm hiring a higher percentage of not just okay performers, but high performers, A players.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that backstory on Topgrading. I think it adds some context. Now let's get to some of the good stuff. What are some of the from an entrepreneur's perspective, what are some of the biggest hiring problems that you've seen, and how does Topgrade provide a solution for that?
Well, I'll start with one where we didn't have a creative solution. We just stayed in touch with clients for the past many years, and that was, I guess, really brought to the fore with the pandemic. Can't find enough high performers, and we've said for decades to almost every company, the more applicants you get, the more one or more A players in that pool. And to get them, now here's where we're not particularly creative, but we just, how do you pack teams with A players? What are the best recruitment methods? The best is, who do you know? I mean, your own personal network.
Yes.
Let those people know, and they'll let others know. We want to hire high performers. Same with all the employees, particularly the A players. Who do they know? Okay. And run ads, and people are frustrated with the various job boards. There's so many out there today, and we pay the money, and most of the resumes we get are worthless. But keep it up, pay a little bit more, maybe consider taking it out of a marketing budget. But if you get 30, 40 applicants for a job, and then use the top grading methodology to screen those, then you have a pretty good chance there are 3 or 4 A players, or those with A potentials in that group. If there are only 5 applicants, it's going to be pretty hard to. I hope that there's an A player in that group. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that a lot of weak performers, or mishires, as we would call them, not necessarily that they're weak people, but they're probably wrong fit, either culturally, from a capability perspective, or even a character perspective. So. Seem to get away with getting through the gatekeepers to be able to get these positions. And it's in retrospect, you look back and actually see, well, this person's probably not the right fit. Perhaps I should have spent a little bit more time in the start before I actually rushed into this person's and took their resumes and so forth for granted. Yes,
you're fooled. That's what's happened. Bottom line, 1 million people were hired in the world today, and at least half of those hired fooled the company that hired them. Right?
Yeah, right.
And they do it because they know most larger companies prohibit their managers from taking reference calls for the reason that you mentioned. They're going to fire us, particularly, or sue us, particularly if someone's in a protected group. Not so. Most states actually do protect the companies and the individuals. If they're someone who is a poor employee, say so. If you've done a good job of setting the standards and giving them feedback and so forth. But the frustration comes from, wow, put the person through our paces here, our methods. Boy, I was really impressed with that resume. Even obviously they're online, but wow, look at this resume. That was good. We had a phone screen. Person gave all these positive responses. and ran them through interviews, seemed to have what we'd expect or hope for responses to all those questions, but seemed a little bit fake. Am I being played? Am I being gamed? And then when I asked for references, they gave me 3 references of someone, their next door neighbor, their psychiatrist, and a golfing buddy. What's wrong with this approach? So that's what they've done. So in come what I hit on, luckily, many decades ago. I happened to be interviewing an A player for a marketing position, and I jokingly said, what we'd like is to be able to talk with the managers you reported to. My clients, not me personally, but their clients would love to have excellent verification of who you are. Now, they can do background checks. Some are relatively inexpensive, just is the resume for real, and a couple other things. But to get some really good insights into you, who knows you better than the managers you reported to, maybe your wife or husband. And this candidate said, I'll arrange them. I'll arrange the interviews. Wow, boom. Why didn't I think of that? So I talked to the clients. They did it. This was back in Milwaukee, and the word got out around there that if you let the applicants, candidates know that a final step in hiring, when there's a job, that's on the table and they want to, actually A players will want to arrange for those calls, and they'll be very frank about it. You're going to hear some pretty positive things about them. Now, they don't actually schedule the call next Thursday at 7 o'clock. They just talk to mainly the bosses in the past 10 years. Those are the people you want to talk with and say, would you be willing to take the call? And they'll say yes. And when are you available? The next 3 nights, 7 to 8, and here's my mobile number. So A-player candidates will get back to you within 48 hours and say, yeah, I've talked to all the people you want to talk with, and so feel free to call them. They'll take your call. Bingo. So we've accomplished a couple things, all right, by letting candidates know at the outset, before you've wasted time with their Mickey Mouse, half of them are Mickey Mouse resumes. Let them know early, and I have some suggestions for how to do that. But if all candidates know that they're going to ultimately be required to arrange calls with the people, the hiring manager, the entrepreneur wants to talk with, bosses, maybe a couple peers, maybe a couple of direct reports, and that's fine with them, that means that they're probably pretty sharp, all right? Not necessarily the best fit for this job, but sharp and honest. And immediately, literally immediately, overnight, when people have agreed, we call this the Topgrading Truth Motivator, the interviews feel right. It's human to human interviews. It's a conversation with someone's not trying to bullshit us, not feeling manipulated. It's real. Just overnight that will happen. So that increases your chances of hiring someone who becomes a high performer, because they know they'll be expected to arrange those calls, do those calls, right? This is like step 3, but do those calls, and their people will take the calls, and they'll say some nice things and positive things, and we have some advice on how to get the most out of it. But to get around to it, the A players, bosses, will tell you the truth. You ask them what are their strengths, they'll give you strengths. We all have weaker points. And Pat Smith said you'd probably list 3 or 4 things that I could improve it. And the bosses will say it and say, yes, Pat knows, I'll be telling you this. It's honesty creeping into all parts of the hiring process, where I couldn't believe, part of me said, I can't believe it. I'll give you the real number. 50 years later, throughout the world, people are fooling the people who hire them, right? Yeah. And the costs are just what you said. They're very costly, very time consuming to replace people. But also, 2/3 of startups fail, and the most often given reason is mishires. a financial person, and I don't have to tell the entrepreneurs that. They're probably very sensitive to that. So
that's true. Yeah, I think this whole concept of the threat of a reference check, not only threat but actually follow through of it, make sure that what they're telling you in the interview is definitely going to be cross-checked. So there's very little scope, I guess, for hyping untruths.
Yes,
but I think most people are lazy, aren't they? Really, most people interviewing are lazy. They just want to look at a couple of applicants. I think it's this one. Let's run with that, and then in a rear vision mirror find out. Well, perhaps I should have spent a bit more time.
Most management ask, how good are your insights into people? I mean, pretty good. I think a pretty good judge of people. Tell me about your hiring experience. Blank stare. Not so good, right? Right. And so you're right. That's why the system is there. And there are a couple other things I'll mention that are sort of common sense, but rarely done. People who are hired want feedback. How am I doing after 5 months, 6 months, or something like that? Well, the right way to do it is to hire from what we call a job scorecard. It's not just a general definition. The sales reps are going to be calling on the other clients to build business and blah, blah, blah. Just general. No, what are they going to be held accountable for in terms of the numbers and how they do the job? How they do the job incorporates, are they a good fit for the job? If they're expecting to be out traveling all the time and you can't travel so much, or the manager is the one who's going to be making ultimately the decisions, not you. All that stuff. It's a little bit of time to do it. It sounds a little bureaucratic, but if the people in the company, the entrepreneur, and other key people can agree, this is a job and how it's to be done, and candidates aren't told anything preparatory, but here's what the job is. Okay, let's see if there's a fit. Then that's a good starting point. Then let all candidates know. Final step in hiring is for candidates or you to arrange reference calls. If they say, great, I'd love to do that, that's a lot different than if a person says, really? I don't think I can get my bosses to talk. Mm-hmm. All right. And I wouldn't want them to talk with you because they'll probably tell you some negative things. Now, you referred to the threat of reference check, Tony, and we used to call it the torque technique, the threat of reference check. But it's very clear to A players, it's a promise. It's a promise. It's good. They want to do this. And because, threat of reference check sounds negative, we decided to call it the truth motivator, but it's exactly the same thing.
Right.
The other thing,
I guess the question I got, Brad, is that there are probably a lot of people on the call thinking, well, if I've got 30 or 40 applicants, I'm probably not going to spend 4 hours on each one. That's probably overkill. But you have a process as part of the top grading of screening before they even get to that point, don't you? So the people you're sitting in front of are the people that have already been well screened. They understand that there is going to be reference checks.
Right.
And the people you're talking to is probably out of the 40, maybe 3 or 4 even, as low as that.
For many years, clients would say, God, Brad, I hope you come up with something so that we can screen applicants, because we know about 50% of resumes are BS. So we have phone screen interview after phone screen interview after phone screen interview. And, we can tell them about the truth motivator and so forth, and that certainly helps. But a lot of, the personality tests are so easily faked. You just Google and get the tests, and abilities tests are important. If you want someone who has to be an expert in some programming language or something, those are okay. Some of the culture fit tests are okay. All right. But we finally came up with something. Okay. And that is a very short, something can be included in an application form. We call it the pre-screen snapshot. And when people are set up, it only takes about a half hour to get set up, then the computer automatically sends a thank you note to all the applicants. Thank you for your interest in joining XYZ. We'd like to continue the hiring process. So there are a couple things you should know. One is, final step in hiring, we ask candidates to arrange reference calls with managers and others. And two, we'd like a little more information than you provided in your resume on just your most recent 2 jobs. Well, It includes name of boss. Okay, best guess of how boss would rate them. Certainly you get how long they've been in the jobs and so forth. So a third of the people, if you had like 24 applicants, 8 people will fill out the pre-screen snapshot. And it's pretty, it's 4 colors, but you go right to how do they say, if they arrange reference calls with Pat Jones, the boss in that job, how will she rate their overall performance? Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. Bingo. These are super accurate because hundreds of thousands have been done where they've talked to people. They knew what candidates said that bosses would rate them, and sure enough, that's how bosses rate them. A players, they guess, would rate them excellent or very good. But as Jim Collins said, who wrote Good to Great, good isn't good enough. So, Tony, if you were hiring someone and you were flying, you only had 5 minutes to interview them, and said, give me the names of your bosses in the past 10 years. Okay. All right. 4 of them. How would they rate you? Oh, they're calling boarding. I got to go. How would they do overall performance? If they say excellent or very good, okay, maybe follow up with them when you get back in town. But they say, well, actually, I've had 6 bosses in 14 years, and they'd all, no, not anyone would rate me excellent, nor very good. But I think they'd rate me good. Does that sound like an A player? No. So this is really, really reliable. So the pre-screen snapshot at topgrading.com, you can scroll down if you'd like that, the free trial, for as long as you'd like, just try it, because this solves some problems. The Truth Motivator is in there. You're going to be doing the reference calls with bosses. That's good. And you don't have to spend any time with anyone who doesn't think that bosses would rate them excellent or very good. And the only other thing we haven't talked about that's really important is what you mentioned. And I can spend 3 or 4 hours. The top grading interview is described in detail in some of these other books, like the 3rd edition of Top Grading. But frankly, you can just Google it, and people have put it on there. You can see it. And, wow, this is a long interview. All it really is a chronological interview. And all the interviewing approaches that have been scientifically researched don't work, or they're massive. Like, how would you handle a situation like this? What's your favorite color? Now, it's best to go through a person's background, just a couple of questions on their education years. Then on each job, there's some basic questions. What did you do? How did you do? How did you get rated? What did you like most and least about that job? What were any significant successes and failures? And what's the name of your boss? How would that boss rate you? Why did you leave the job? And then you ask follow-up questions. So that's basically the Top Grading interview guide. And, it can be done in an hour and a half for a candidate for a sales job. For a management job, spend the time to do it. We do. I mean, we're hired. This is what we do for, day in and day out. And they're 4-hour interviews for high-level jobs. As a candidate for your financial officer, spend the time, because think, as Tony has suggested, the hours lost for someone who's a mishire, replacing them. Yeah, but whatever A players you have, you want them working with the people who aren't performing to hopefully get them up to speed, or at least avoid causing more problems, and we don't have our A players just fixing the problems low performers found. So this is worthwhile. Any clients who have calculated the hours are in the hundreds of hours at an executive level for a mishire, wasted not just by the CEO but peers. So for the entrepreneurs, not just you, but how those low performers drag down everyone else. So this is a huge time saver. That pre-screen snapshot identifies the 1/3 who are honest and high performing. Of course, you have to interview them, see if there's a good culture fit. But that just alone will save you a bunch of time and money. So I encourage anyone to try. And tell you one more thing I discovered with GE. Some very sharp executives at GE, when trained in 2-day workshops, weren't connecting the dots from job 3 to job 4 to job 5 to job 6. And yet GE went from 25% A players hired to 50% in 4 years. Yeah, everybody was doing high fives. I wasn't doing high fives. I'm sitting in on some of these workshops and I'm saying, God, they're just not connecting the dots. There's a lot to be done mentally in interviewing people. It's very complex. We have whole books on the interview. So here's the solution. Drum roll. A second interviewer. For management jobs or for high-level professional jobs, find someone just in your network. Almost anyone can help. If there are 2 interviewers, it's the Tandem top grading interview. Do your best to go through that chronological interview, okay? And because people are telling you the truth, they're not trying to con you, and because anything they tell you can be confirmed or not confirmed in the reference checks that you'll do that they'll arrange, it's worth the time. It's definitely worth the time.
That's great. You mentioned before the results from GE that went up from 33% to 50%. And earlier in the discussion, you said that if you were a medical doctor and you had 2/3 of your patients that weren't coming out with success, then it would be a big issue. So what sort of results are you consistently seeing? Obviously, you Googled before, mishires and poor quality A-grade players that are not being hired. What's the results you're sort of getting?
The results
using Topgrading?
I was just editing our e-guide today and saying it sounds too good to be true. And I know, everybody knows, if it sounds too good to be true, it can't be true. And the people watching this podcast are just thinking, if I can increase the percentage of good performers, thank you, Jim Collins, but I'd be happy to take that now. But very quickly we say, skip that. You can do it. If you follow these methods, stop blaming yourself. You've just been using the wrong approaches. You use these approaches, you will hire more A players at every salary level. Okay. So do this. And what we say, if you go to topgrading.com, click on case studies, we've had hundreds, and we keep fresh about, 30 or 40 of them, large companies, small companies, entrepreneurs, people who never hired us to train them or anything. They just did the stuff that we're talking about today. Right? That's fine with me because I want to spread the word. And here's what the average is across dozens of case studies. 26% A players hired before top grading, 85% with top grading. And more people say, bull, you know what, it can't be. Yeah, really. No, these are named companies. Go ahead and call them. Call the CEOs, okay? You can track them down and see. And every one of the clients who submitted case studies was told that the one day will be PhD candidates using as their dissertation vetting of top grading case studies. And Michael Lawrence at Georgia Tech did exactly that. And he said, wow, he talked to CEOs, he talked to the human resources, personnel people. And what he said in the United States, probably the gross national product would go up $3 trillion if these were best practices. I'd say best practices, just what we've talked about today. So don't look at yourself and say, yeah, maybe I'm not such a good leader, I'm not such a good interviewer and so forth. Try it, and you will find very, very quickly that you are. So use the pre-screen snapshot. You can get trained on that, or you just do it yourself right online. Or 2, you can push a button, and Brad Smart is reading what some technical people put together. Here's what your screen looks like. Here's where you put your cursor. Here's where you have to put your name, address, and all that kind of stuff in there. Or just call us, and then the number's given there. And we have someone, Brian, really nice guy, and he'll just help you. You get on the screen with him, share the screen, and he'll just get you set up. And then it's automatic after that. And so you just pay attention with the people who submitted the pre-screen snapshot. That 1/3, at least they're honest, at least they're sharp, and they won't be gaming you, won't be trying to manipulate you in any interviews, and they will arrange for calls with bosses.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll put those links into our show notes so that
Okay,
anyone
cool.
watching it can actually
Thanks for helping
easily
with
connect
that.
those. It's just, Brad, it's just phenomenal results, really. And that's one of the areas that I'm just so encouraged and want to promote top grading because of the results. And I said earlier in the introduction, great quality teams are foundational plank to a great quality business. You can't have one without the other. And so this is foundational. How do you actually create a system and a process to consistently recruit and retain high quality talent? It should be, it should be a 101 in business, but hiring gets very, very little profile when it comes to that. So I think that's one area. So I'll definitely put some show notes in. I think we've just dipped our toes in the water, really, just to really skim a stone across the surface, I guess, in what top grading is about. And I would encourage people to read a lot of the resources, go to the sites, and actually get schooled up on this process because it works. So just, Brad, in closing, that's a question I ask most people on the show. You're obviously respectfully at the sunset of your career, if I could put it that way. And I'd like you to actually think back to a 20-year-old Brad and what sort of advice you'd give him, knowing what you know now, when it comes to the whole area of hiring talent.
Yeah. Well, when I was 20, I was already getting the help from that management psychology group who were going to eventually hire me. And like entrepreneur, I knew somehow that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, to run my own company. And with that thought in mind, so what's important? And I mentioned earlier all the summer jobs they gave me. A players, high performers stood out. That they were really was most important. So I was naive and optimistic that I got a PhD from Purdue and studied thousands of studies on hiring high performers, I'd have an edge up on that. But academia was not interested. And then I go to work for them and they weren't interested. So deep breath, and I guess that would be the advice to people is just take the deep breath and keep grinding out. If there's something you need, to learn or do, find your own way. And I was on CNN with Poppy Harlow interviewed me. It was a little embarrassing. And she said, Brad, can you summarize the key methods of top grading in 1 minute? And I did. Truth motivator, candidate reference calls. Yeah, ideally start out with a job scorecard and try a chronological interview with another person. She said, that's your whole career? Yeah, that's about it. But it's not a cure for cancer, but it certainly could help a whole lot. But I think we're inundated with so much stuff every day. It's just hard to focus on something. But invitation to your the viewers, be smart at topgrading.com. You have any questions? If you want to get set up for the pre-screen snapshot, call the other number that Tony will give you. But I answer the calls and emails every day. I'm compulsive about that. Someone is struggling, and one of these steps that we've talked about today doesn't seem to work. I want to know about it, and I guarantee you I'll have an answer because earlier today, talking with my team, that the way a company, that entrepreneur can have a company successful with top grading is when other managers are hired, okay, get up to 50, 60, whatever people, and they're using top grading, measure whether they're actually using these basic common steps in high, and they're not cutting corners, all right? Because there's an extremely high correlation between follow through these methods and the success hiring, and hold your future managers accountable for getting the good hires and using the methods, right? And if you get pushback, do it yourself. I mean, that's one of the things that'd be useful, I think, for the entrepreneurs. So many of you would say, well, I have to interview because I don't have anyone else who can be interviewed. Yeah, that's fine. If you can locate someone who can be a tandem interviewer. It's not already in your company, another associate, maybe even pay them if they help out with interviews. You can probably benefit that way, because it's been common recommendation since GE went from 50 to 85% A players hired, measured just really conscientiously and rigorously with integrity. If all of them can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah, I think having those extra set of eyes and ears and perspective, when you get two people in a room, you obviously see different things, and that's a great point. But it's been an absolute joy to have you on the show today. Some great insights, and really look forward to our listeners and viewers tapping into the top grading process and improving their hires of top tier talent. So thanks once again. Great to have you with us.
Fun getting to know you, Tony. Let's stay in touch.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that.
Sure. Bye-bye.